From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is U.S. Farm Report.
Welcome to U.S. Farm Report this weekend. I'm Tyne Morgan, and here's what's ahead. A dairy family in Wisconsin put on a 30-day notice to find a new home for their milk.
So you didn't get a phone call? You didn't get anything?
No. In fact, before I read this letter, I found out on Facebook.
While the president says fixing NAFTA will help, Canada is pushing back. What's been the biggest surprise for Machinery Pete in 2017?
First 3.5 months of 2017, we've seen some really strong prices on sprayers.
We're on the road with Machinery Pete. As ranchers in the plains try to rise from the ashes, the devastation is still fresh in their mind.
It's gone and it's devastating. It's hard to wake up and look at what you have or what you don't have.
But there's a new way to help. We'll tell you about the $1 Million Wildfire Relief Challenge coming up. And in John's world,
what does a currency manipulator really mean?
U.S. Farm Report, brought to you by the dependable, long-lasting Chevy Silverado.
Now for the market-related news. The Trump administration taking the first step in launching a bilateral trade deal with Japan in hopes of reaching a new trade deal altogether. During his 10-day tour of Asia, Vice President Mike Pence launching bilateral trade talks to take the place of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. While Japan says it won't give up on the TPP and will move ahead without the U.S., Pence still pushing for what he calls a balanced bilateral trade relationship with not only Japan, but other countries.
Our goal is simple. We seek trade that is free, and we seek trade that is fair. This requires breaking down barriers, leveling the playing field so that American companies and exporters can enjoy high levels of market access.
Details aren't being negotiated yet as the U.S. doesn't have a U.S. trade representative confirmed. Lean hog futures seeing major price pressure this week, falling to the lowest level since October. Herd expansion and fund liquidation leading to the downward slope. Here's Standard Grains' Joe Vaclavic on the 6th-month low in prices.
Funds have been big sellers, aggressive sellers of hog futures in recent weeks. If you look at the CFTC report, funds once had a big-time long position in this market, and they've been aggressive sellers of it for the last couple of months, really. So funds are still probably net long just a little bit here, but far cry from where they were, 8 or 9 weeks ago.
While U.S. dairy farmers face an oversupply situation, production continues to climb. USDA's latest milk production report showing production grew 1.8% in March, totaling 17.5 billion pounds. Now production per cow is also on the rise, up 18 pounds above last year. South Dakota, they're seeing the biggest jump, with state production climbing 16.4% just in March. 63 people were indicted within Brazil's Ministry of Agriculture over the meat packing scandal. The charges surround federal authorities accused of taking bribes in exchange for fraudulent sanitary permits, and claims this went on for years. Now this stems from the police probe on March 17th into the world's largest beef exporter. After the raids, the country's exports plummeted, but have since rebounded. Officials in Mexico think they could have a trade deal with Argentina worked out by the end of the year. That includes reducing tariffs on both automobiles and ag products. Reuters reporting talks advanced this week as Mexican officials look for other sources of products such as grain. Farmers able to make some planting progress last week, but progress is still lagging last year. USDA says 6% of the corn crop is in the ground, down 6 percentage points from last year, but 8% of the cotton crop is planted. That's actually a point ahead of average. And USDA calling 54% of the winter wheat crop good to excellent, improving 1 point from last week. Well, drought starting to creep across the southeast again. The latest drought monitor showing 80% of the region is considered abnormally dry, an increase of 5 points in a week, and 44% is in moderate drought. That's a jump of 11 points in a week. But improvements in the southern plains. Look at Kansas, seeing a 5-point improvement in the abnormally dry conditions, and D1, or what's considered moderate drought, it's pretty much wiped off the map in the state. A big improvement from 3 months ago. Those are the headlines. Meteorologist Cindy Klassen is in for Mike Hoffman this week. Cindy, some hail and severe weather really pushed across the U.S. this week. What's in store next week?
Well, Tyne, I think that we're going to see more active weather as we head into this coming week. Let's start with the U.S. Drought Monitor, and we've seen still a lot of improvement in the western parts of the country, but we're watching the southeast because that's where we're seeing dryness continuing to expand. Over the last 4 weeks, boy, notice the difference a month ago, and as we continue through time, we are going to be seeing great improvement across the area, especially in the Plain states and in the west. But watch as the dryness continues to expand, especially as you get towards Georgia and into Florida. All right, what do we have for the week ahead? Some more active weather. We've got a front draped across the northern tier states. Look for some showers along that. We see a front in the central and northern plains. That's going to push off to the east as you get into the early part of the week. We're looking at some very warm temperatures across the south, maybe some windy conditions there as well. On Wednesday, we're going to be seeing that front moving into the Great Lakes, down through much of the Corn Belt and into the southern plains, and we'll continue to see some wet weather in the northwestern United States. High pressure will kind of keep most of the southeast dry as we get into Wednesday. Now, Friday looks a lot like Wednesday, but it actually is a different part of the front, as we'll see another low pressure over towards the Chicagoland area affecting the Great Lakes, stretching down into parts of the plains, and still some wet weather in parts of the northwest. Will be hot and mostly sunny as you get down into the southeast. Still some windy conditions in the southern United States. We'll have another look at weather coming up in the next half hour. Tyne?
All right, thanks, Cindy. Well, coming up, we'll talk about the price pressure in the grain markets. We'll do that with Dan Huber and Kevin Dooling after the break.
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by Kubota's full line of field-proven hay tools. Explore the full lineup at Kubota.com.
Welcome back. Here now with me this week, Dan Huber and Kevin Dooling to talk markets. Let's start off with this corn market. I mean, really what's causing this pressure? Is it solely the funds? I mean, is it just looking at the massive supplies at South America? What's playing into this corn market right now?
Well, certainly a combination of all the above, but I think as much as anything, we just don't have a new stimulus in there. The market is, yes, we know the funds are on the short side, but they don't have a great incentive to add additional there. We know the acreage, or at least we're guessing the acreage is going to be lower this year. So that eliminates maybe some of the downside incentive, but boy, to really get a rally stimulating, or something to stimulate a rally, we're going to have to get to a weather market, and it's just not in the cards here this early in the year just yet. So.
Yeah, so if you look at previous years, Kevin, can you compare this year in the corn market to any other year?
If we judge on the current weather maps, it's looking like 2009, 2013 both play. We had some delays there. In both of those years, the lows were made the last week of April. Okay, so that's next week. So with that in mind, and then the market rallied about $1 off each of those, and the funds short to do that. But as Dan says, we've got to, the weather maps have to confirm. We have to keep the soils cold. We have to have more rain to do that. Otherwise, it's going to act heavy.
And this rain keeps, it's in the forecast again. I mean, we look at these cooler temperatures kind of that we're experiencing right now, but that hasn't really hit the market yet. Do you think it will in the coming week?
It's really always a challenge to get markets to really get active on too much moisture in the springtime. And partially one because rain makes grain is part of the mentality, but the other is we know in a 7 to 10 day period we can have this crop planted.
Right.
So it's really got to be pushing us back well into May before I think you get much excitement on too late in the season to get the corn in the ground. So.
You agree? I mean, could we get a little bit of a bump anywhere if we continue to have like another week of delayed planting?
I think, as we look at the fund position, and when you count the aggregate fund position of corn, beans, wheat, it's by far a record short. So it's not going to take that big of a stimulus to get a sizable, bump in the thing. We just can't see it today. And, I'm telling producers, now's not a sell window. Now is just, let's just wait till we have something a little concrete here. It's not good timing.
But if we do have some delayed planting, Dan, does that play into the theory, USDA's thoughts that we will see lower corn acreage? I mean, because I talked to some farmers that said, if it's nice and I can get in the field, I'm just going to go and maybe plant some more corn.
I think we're already really pushing to the window. That's kind of out of the question. Not that you couldn't still see some acreage switch back to corn, but no, as a whole, I think it is getting late enough now that to see a large switch back to corn versus beans when the economics still favor the soybeans, it'd be a challenge to get many guys to change their mind at this late in game.
Definitely. So. What about soybeans? Is it is it just a weather scare that could move these prices higher? I mean, is that really all we have?
I mean, the good news with soybeans is the record-breaking demand. That's going to continue. You know, we had another sale announced today. You know, an unknown destination, 146,000 tons, and so demand is going to keep a floor. The trouble with beans are that is the only grain that is going to continue to add stocks with normal weather. Okay, if you have normal weather, corn's gonna back up. You know, we're gonna drop stocks. Wheat's gonna drop stocks. Beans are gonna add. So that's, you know, to me they're the most bearish grain right now. But at least, you know, the demand is gonna remain.
And the large South American crop, I mean, it continues to just go up, but you think that's already pretty much priced in?
To a large extent. You know, the Brazilian crop, of course, is the bigger of the two, just by production standards, but also because Argentina is still having a little bit of a weather issue at this point in time. So, I mean, some analysts have started to back off their crop just a touch, maybe 1 million metric tons. I mean, it's not a large scale back away, but it's a little less supply than maybe once was anticipated. But I agree 100%. I mean, we are in a true supply side market, which means it is weather related issues. Demand is phenomenal. I mean, we really have record levels of demand, both corn and beans. But on the same token, the market knows that. It's not like it's increasing at some exponential rate that's really going to shock us out of here. So it has to be a weather issue. And right now, that's just not in the cards just yet. I mean, certainly the critical months are ahead of us here. So.
Yeah. So what about this wheat market? I mean, it has not really been fun to watch, and we continue to say prices are so low that we cannot move any lower, but the wheat market continues to prove us wrong. So we'll talk about kind of the fundamentals, but also the technicals of the wheat market. Really, what are we looking at right now? We'll do that when we come back on U.S. Farm Report.
This is Machinery Pete, inviting you to check out my new website, machinerypete.com. Offering farmers tens of thousands of used equipment listings to search, let Machinery Pete help you find and value your next piece of used equipment.
Welcome back. Well, let's take a look at this wheat market. I mean, we see some cooler temperatures in the forecast, and we look over the next 7 to 10 days. Do you think that possibly we could see some damage? And if so, will the market even care?
The market is doing its best to warn us that it does not want any more record production like last year. We had such high yields in so many places. I mean, everywhere except for the EU essentially had the high yields, and it's doing its best to say, we're going lower if you're going to do that again. So the good news is I don't, you know, if you base it on crop ratings today, I don't think we're going to see that. And once we get the new numbers in May, which will be the first new crop look, or 2017-18 look at the supply and demand, you're going to see the major exporters drop 35 million metric tons. That's a lot. And so if we factor China out of the equation, who's going to own 51% of the stocks, you're going to actually have the tightest stocks usage ever. So to me, it's a very interesting situation. Demand's going to be record breaking again next year. You know, India's going to import. China continues to import. To me, it doesn't quite warrant the 900 million bushel net short the specs have at the moment.
So basically, right now, the pressure in the wheat market, is it just funds?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I think you brought up a great point. It really applies to corn as well. And we look over at China and look at the inventories they have, and they really balloon the world inventories. I think it kind of skews really what's out there. Well, those products are not going to leave China. I mean, they're going to find a way to use them at home, be it corn, be it wheat. If you exclude those from the world numbers, we really have a very tight stocks to usage ratio, or average at best. So here again, I think the market's kind of put the blinders on. Well, we have all the supply, you know, there's no issue out there. And again, it would not take much of a disruption and all of a sudden that picture changes pretty dramatically.
And at the same time, we look at this low, both winter wheat and spring wheat plantings. I mean, so it seems like it's setting us up for an even more tighter stocks scenario as we go into the next year.
Yeah, I agree. We don't have room for big hiccups on the world scale. If we do have a big hiccup, you know, like the dryness in Europe, so to speak, Russia's trending dry, you know, we could really drop the carryout. So I guess I'm telling producers, look, you know, if you have to sell, but man, we got to buy that back. Option volatility is just low. You can buy at the money calls cheap, and you know, it's worth re-ownership, in
Yeah.
my opinion.
Yeah, certainly. And we've encouraged people to maintain ownership. Yeah, I mean, you still utilize basis, take what the market gives you in a local area, try to take advantage of that. But when it comes to a potential upside, maintain ownership some fashion or another. Oftentimes the best way to do that is through an option contract, particularly with the low volatility that we see here right now.
Are you telling producers to do the same on corn?
If the basis levels are correct. I mean, and again, I think our approach to marketing oftentimes is, we get so wrapped up in price that we tend to think price first, basis and spreads later. We try to take the other track. Play your basis. You know your local basis levels. Those are areas that really can take advantage of year in, year out. There's so many tools that are available to you today. The price can be manipulated, if for lack of a better word, with other instruments. But manage your basis, manage your space, and then we'll work on the price with either through physical inventory or through the use of futures and options. So.
Well, we talked about the pressure in the wheat pit. Lean hogs also seeing some pressure this week, hitting a 6-month low. Again, is that just the funds dictating these prices at this point?
Well, yeah, funds dictating prices, but also, we certainly have an ample supply of hogs around. The numbers we know are back on the increase and probably continue to, not that this is necessarily going to stop them, but, demand has not really come back to life necessarily the way it should. A lot of emphasis over on the cattle right now with the idea that we're going to start moving more cattle back to China. So I think that's just, it probably a little spread activity on top of it where you're favoring the cattle over the hogs at this point in time, but hopefully close to the tail end of that right now. So.
Yeah, cattle was one of those bright spots this week. When we look at the fund position in the cattle market, what are you seeing?
Well, they like it. It's one of the few ag markets they do, and they may continue that for a little while, so we may get a good opportunity at some point. The numbers, there's probably an even split between the bulls and bears on the fundamental side. You have, it goes back to that large placement number we had a few months ago, but for some reason they're pushing cattle forward. So it's pretty dynamic.
Yeah, real quick, do you think the cattle market's overdone?
Not necessarily. No, I think we had, a couple of weeks ago, it really looked like we had kind of reached a tipping point. The news about China kind of reinvigorated the bulls once again. I think we have a tremendous amount of upside right now, but close, but not quite there. So.
All right, thank you. We'll get their closing thoughts when we come back on U.S. Farm Report. All right, time now for closing thoughts. So Dan, let's start with you.
Well, as we had discussed just a bit earlier, I really think this is not the time for producers to panic. When you look at relative value of where the price is for corn, soybeans, wheat, any of them, we're down towards what has been lows over the last several years, where we tend to find value in there. Some people refer to this as being in the winter side of the market cycle. It's kind of this drawn out period where it almost feels like you're in the desert, you can't get out of it. But once you move out of winter, you're back into spring, and spring means new growth and higher prices. So.
All right, thank you, Dan. Kevin?
What's amazing is the kind of the obnoxiousness of the hedge fund community or managed money. They've managed, with crude oil, they stuck with the long side for all winter long. We never got a break to buy. Finally, the market dipped to the commercials attitude. And in grain right now, it's a similar situation. We don't know how long they'll keep selling, but once they change their mind, then things are going to get better quickly.
All right, thank you both. We appreciate it. Stay with us. John Phipps talks about China next. Should China really be considered a currency manipulator? That's this week's John's World.
Last week, the Trump administration surprised many observers, including me, by declining to declare China a currency manipulator. Now, this is one of those policies that we all think we kind of understand, but probably don't, so here's a quick ag-splainer. The term currency manipulator is an official designation from the U.S. Treasury Department that a country is rigging the markets for its own currency. The guideline is when it spends over 2% of GDP, their economic output, buying other currencies and selling their own. This drives down the value of their currency and makes exports from their country cheaper, but imports more expensive. You have to remember, manipulating your currency creates winners and losers at home and abroad. President Trump had promised to declare China a currency manipulator many times during the election campaign, even though China since 2014 has been selling its massive hoard of dollars to increase the value of the yuan, not lower it. You can see that on this graph of their foreign reserve holdings. Regardless, according to the Currency Act of 2015, once the Treasury Department declares a country a manipulator during its annual review, it can place up to 25% tariffs on goods from that country after a year of negotiations to resolve the problem. But the president already possesses the power to enact tariffs on his or her own, so the designation is largely symbolic. That said, countries can be extremely sensitive to symbolic acts, especially China. Obviously, avoiding unneeded trade friction with China is good for many sectors of ag, especially proteins and soybeans, so this development seems to be a step in the right direction. On the other hand, industries like manufacturing that were counting on a tougher trade policy from the new administration are less pleased.
Thanks, John. Well, those devastating wildfires that raged across the plains left a lasting impact on families and ranches in its path. But standing outside those fires, if you're looking for a way to help, you'll want to stay tuned. We'll tell you about a $1 million wildfire relief challenge coming up later on the show.
But you've got to be tough when consumed by desire. 'Cause it's not enough just to stand outside the fire.
From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is U.S. Farm Report.
Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report. This weekend, we have much more ahead. It's a dairy dilemma in Wisconsin, and while the president is blaming Canada, our trading partners to the north are pushing back. Wildfire relief is still underway in the plains, and there's a new call for help. We're on the road with Machinery Pete, where for dairy farmers in Wisconsin, it's all about quality feed and equipment. And John Phipps has what he calls breaking news in customer support. Now for the headlines. Loan volume is skyrocketing across the country as farmers and ranchers face another month of depressed prices. The latest Rural Main Street Index out of Creighton University shows the index falling below growth neutral for the 20th straight month. The author of the index, Ernie Goss, says weak farm commodity prices just continue to squeeze rural economies, with livestock prices falling nearly 6% over the past 12 months. Goss says it's loan volume that's soaring as banks aren't rejecting as many of those producers applying for a loan.
Operating loans, even there, the interest rates are rising a bit. Now, still not much, but the qualifications are getting tougher, and so there are getting rising restrictions on operating loans.
One banker surveyed in Minnesota telling the RMI they are seeing a lot of farm auction sales in the last 6 months, either from farmers retiring or those getting out of farming altogether. And we could have a new ag secretary on Monday. Congress reconvenes on April 24th and is scheduled to vote on nominee former Georgia Governor Sonny Perdue. The vote is scheduled for 5:30 p.m. on Monday. The Senate Ag Committee confirmed Perdue on March 30th. Meteorologist Cindy Clausen filling in for Mike Kaufman this week. Cindy, do you think there will be at least some windows where farmers can plant the next 30 days?
Well, Tyne, we're certainly hoping for that, but I think we're going to be seeing at least times of rain. You might be able to get out there a little bit, but hopefully we don't have too soggy of fields. Let's take a look at the jet stream. We've been seeing kind of the zonal flow, and that's been keeping these system after system moving through much of the Corn Belt. And that's going to continue for the first part of the week, but watch as we see this big trough developing in the western United States, and we might actually see a bit of a cutoff low as we get in towards next weekend. Very warm temperatures then in the eastern part of the country. We'll have to watch to see how stormy things get, though, towards next weekend. Now, as far as looking the long range, we're looking at above normal temperatures for a good chunk of the country, especially in the east and on into the southwest. Fairly normal temperatures in the northwest. And as far as that precipitation goes, not really any very strong signals, but it looks like above normal precipitation in Great Lakes and into the upper Midwest. Fairly normal, but of course this is a kind of a rainier time of the year for a lot of areas, especially where we're trying to get some planting done. Tyne?
Thanks, Cindy. Well, President Donald Trump vowing to help dairy farmers left without a home for their milk.
We're also going to stand up for our dairy farmers in Wisconsin.
The president speaking in Wisconsin this week, fighting the trade battle with Canada, promising U.S. dairy farmers that the administration will intervene to restore exports of American milk.
Because in Canada, some very unfair things have happened to our dairy farmers and others, and we're going to start working on that with Ron and with Scott and with Paul and with all of your representatives. What's happened to you is very, very unfair. It's another typical one-sided deal against the United States, and it's not going to be happening for long.
His comments stemming from the dairy dilemma in Wisconsin, where Grassland Dairy dropped 75 farmers, saying it's because Canada cut off the market for ultra-filtered milk. Now, trade groups for U.S. dairy farmers complaining that since Canada's policy rolled out, that it violates the North American Free Trade Agreement. But just this week, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau telling Bloomberg it's not Canada that's the challenge here. Instead, he's blaming the U.S., saying there's a large dairy trade surplus with Canada. Now, those 75 dairy farmers in Wisconsin and Minnesota have been riding a roller coaster of emotions since early April. That's when Grassland Dairy gave them 30-day notice to find a new home for their milk. I visited the Gartman Dairy in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and while they received the best news this week that a new processor is agreeing to take them on and buy their milk, I talked to the family before they got that news and while emotions were still raw. And it's those same emotions playing out on dairy farms across the state, still in desperate search for a new home.
Come on, girls.
For the Gartmans,
Let's go.
milking these 100 head of cows is their livelihood.
Got it? There you go.
And it's always a family affair.
Me and my brother are actually a 7th generation here, and our kids are 8th generation.
But the first week of April, they faced one of their biggest fears.
This was the letter that we had received from Grassland notifying us that we had 30 days to find a new processor for our milk.
Their fate in the form of a letter, not even marked as urgent.
It says it's respectfully Grassland Dairy Products, but yeah, was there
no
signed by the president or somebody like that? No, it's just it's a generic letter.
Yeah.
So you didn't get a phone call, you didn't get anything?
No. In fact, before I read this letter, I found out on Facebook.
They faced a similar obstacle 2 years ago with a processor in Sheboygan.
At that time, even we had more lead time. We had about, I think, a 3-month lead time notice, and even at that, they helped us find a home.
That home was Grassland Dairy, a processor they hope to have for the long haul. Vice President of Business Development for Grassland Dairy told Farm Journal's Milk that Grassland received a 2-day notice that their Canadian market was gone, a destination worth 1 million pounds of milk a day. They said, quote, "We are working with our patrons to find a home for their milk, but we understand it's a challenge in these markets." Going on to say, the last thing we as a company want is to let farmers go. But 75 dairy farmers received the same letter. While a handful already found a home, the majority are left with no answers as to where their milk will go.
75 farmers in Wisconsin, there's 9,200 dairy producers, so it's a small percentage. That's the small part. The big part is it's anxiety to all producers.
Mike North with Commodity Risk Management Group calling the situation unprecedented.
This is a very different situation because it has more to do with politics and less to do with markets or bad financial situations that are broader than even agriculture itself.
North says this dates back to GATT, the General Agreement on Trade and Services from the 90s. That's when Canada decided to take a protective stance on its dairy industry, creating a quota system, but says Canada isn't necessarily to blame.
So they didn't really change their position. They just cleaned up some of the loose ends that existed since that position was first taken. And so ultimately, I wouldn't blame them, so to speak, but at the same time, their action is what quickly caused this scenario.
While some dairy groups hope renegotiating NAFTA will help the bleeding, that doesn't solve the issue today. North says this couldn't come at a worse time as the industry faces oversupply while fighting through spring flush where the cows produce more.
I believe that if this whole affair wouldn't have taken place in April, but rather in July or maybe August, none of this conversation probably would have been had.
Dairy farmers are seeing price pressure across the board as the last month and a half prices continue to erode.
So we've got better days ahead, but unfortunately we're still stuck in this downtrend right now that hasn't shown a clear sign that it's bottomed.
If the Gartmans hadn't found a home for their milk, they would be forced to sell their cows. But by securing a new buyer, it's renewing hope for the future. And instead of these signs and stalls becoming remnants of their past, it will remain a prominent part of their future, opening a new door for the 8th generation. Now, during my visit, some in Wisconsin say this is just another effort in the industry to weed out the smaller producers. But my sources say that's simply not true, that Grassland's decision was based on geography, not size. When we come back, John Phipps.
Big news in customer support this week.
Your call is very important to us. Please hold.
Well, John apparently has some breaking news this week. John?
Well, you can cut the excitement with a knife here at Customer Support today. That's because we are introducing the all-new 2017 model U.S. Farm Report coffee mug. Ta-da! This Crimson Beauty is the result of hours of careful selection with thoughtful attention to detail and fashion, and was definitely not affected by what was on sale at the time when I ordered. While it is brilliant red on the outside with the handsome U.S. Farm Report logo, the mug is pure white inside. This feature will help regular users gauge how long since it was cleaned or possibly even washed. And in a breakthrough in beverage-containing technology, the handle on the 2017 mug is rectangular, which is also very cool and just coincidentally lowered the price about 50 cents. With the new mug, everybody is eligible, even those of you who have previously won mugs or submitted questions and been promised a mug that never seemed to have arrived. So send in your question, comment, or criticism to mailbag@usfarmreport.com and be the first one in your neighborhood with this Scarlet Trophy.
Well, John, I think your definition of breaking news and my definition of breaking news may be a little different, but I do like those mugs. Well, what's the biggest surprise for Machinery Pete when it comes to equipment trends this year? We'll have the answer next.
On the Road with Machinery Pete is brought to you by John Deere. Nothing runs like a deer.
Welcome back. Well, while you may just think of cheese when you think of Wisconsin agriculture, it's actually very diverse. From potatoes to cranberries, some of the specialty crop farmers are early adopters of technology there. But at Reister & Schnell, dairy farmers and custom operators are a key part of their business. This week, we're off to Chilton, Wisconsin, where the health of these farms all starts with good feed. It's a mixed bag for dairy farmers in Wisconsin this year.
Even though the prices were down, the guys were able to put up more crops than normal, and that's kind of helping offset things.
2016 produced a bountiful harvest, setting these dairies up for a good year of feed.
The cow really is a simplistic animal where it wants the same thing day in and day out. So it all starts with the feed.
That feed starts with planting, but after that, harvest is key.
Producer has a forage harvester to go down. It can cost them anywhere from $3,000 to $4,000 an hour.
From custom harvesters to dairy producers putting up feed on their own, it's all about making sure the feed is put up at the proper moisture, in turn bringing the cows better quality feed.
Having a reliable machine is one of the main things.
Sometimes we'll run through the night, and next thing you know, you got over 1,000 some acres put away in 24 hours, and it's pretty amazing, and I would have never dreamed that 20 years ago.
But it's more than just the size of these choppers that's helping to produce better feed.
I'd say the biggest change has been in kernel processing, being able to pretty much annihilate the kernel processing scores. That's pretty much our report card on how we're doing.
It's striving for the best quality feed possible, really driving equipment trends in this area.
This year's been good with the custom operators. A lot of them are at the point where they are upgrading equipment.
New chopper sales have definitely been peaking. We've got a lot of quotes going out right now, doing a lot of evaluations on used choppers coming back in.
Machinery Pete says the used chopper market is an interesting one, since the buyer pool isn't as big as combines or tractors.
So I guess what I've seen the last maybe 2-3 months, I've not noticed really any weakening of auction prices on good condition self-propelled choppers. Not getting stronger, just kind of holding.
But even then, he says it's quality machines bringing the biggest buck.
It's all about condition right now. If it's good shape, prices are strong.
In Wisconsin, it's more than just larger machines moving off these lots.
Search traffic. Wisconsin, I think, was in the top 3 states in terms of number of eyeballs looking at that 100 to 200 horse used tractor range.
But the biggest surprise for Machinery Pete this year is self-propelled sprayers.
Started to see a little uptick end of 2016, but boy, first 3.5 months of 2017, we've seen some really strong prices on sprayers.
For these Wisconsin farmers, it's technology bringing the next wave of interest.
The more data we can have, the better we will do. Any kind of technology has to have a payback, and that's what we're really looking at.
For him, it's robotic milkers. With construction underway, they hope to have it up and running by September.
Ultimately, it's got to pencil for your farm. It's got to be what is right for you. Everybody's got a little different situation. But what we're looking at is we really push the pencil hard, and we feel that we can make it work.
Outside the barn, data and technology is helping produce better quality feed.
Alfalfa is a very expensive crop to produce and maintain, so the more data these guys can get with their alfalfa fields, hopefully the better off they're going to be for profitability on those fields and putting up good quality feed.
We do a lot of technology with our harvest lab, which is basically a yield monitor for the chopper, and all our customers utilize that data for their feed inventories.
As a custom operator, he now provides that data to his customers.
Before it was in a paper copy, and we give them a binder, but now it's becoming more wireless data transfer. When I pull out of the field with that job, I can hit a button on my cell phone and send all the data to them.
And while farmers across the state face depressed prices this year, this dairy farmer is hopeful prices won't continue to fade.
That's really what agriculture is about. Sometimes you have to live another day, and you be smart about it, be strategic, and then move forward.
And next month, we'll visit the panhandle of Texas to see how equipment trends are playing out there. Well, it's areas of Texas hit hard from the wildfires last month. We'll show you how you can help later on the show. Welcome back to Tractor Tales. Well, we decided to give Greg a week off from his tractor duties since he already spent a few days with us in Wisconsin. So instead, we're sharing a few pictures from our Tractor Tales Facebook page. Now, the first one comes to us from Greensburg, Indiana. Dylan McClure shares this 730 diesel high crop from his farm. It was built in 1959 and only was one of 78 total made. The second picture, it's from Jay Graham. His mother, 87, as you can see here, is driving her 1950 T.O. Ferguson that her father actually bought when it was just 6 months old. It's been in the family ever since. And finally, from Harrisonburg, Virginia, we have a 1968 Minneapolis Moline G1000 Vista. Dana Stover shared this picture with us, and she says it's true. Girls love tractors too. Thanks to everyone who submitted a picture. We'll try to actually share some more on the show next week. Today's Country Church salute goes to the Avondale United Methodist Church in Avondale, Colorado. The church got its start in the late 1800s. They tell us enthusiasm and new members has really kept the church vibrant, always willing to take on new projects. Our thanks to Greg for sending that in. Well, the recovery from the wildfires that swept across the plains is ongoing, but there's a new way to help. We have some big news to share next. Welcome back. Well, the wildfires that devastated 1 million acres of ranch land in the Central Plains in March may be behind us, but now is when the real work kicks in. The fires will have a lasting impact for decades to come, and when we visited the area just days after the fire hit, emotions were still raw.
I knew it was windy, but I got a text from my office that said, "Ooh, there's a bad fire southwest of Ashland." The wind turned out of the north and blew this fire, the north fire, south, and there was 25 miles of head fire that it blew south, and it was moving very, very fast.
Coming from Dodge City, my son said, it's really getting eerie down here. It's just almost like it's nighttime.
I was disking north of the house trying to get a fire guard, and I had less than 3 minutes. That wind was blowing probably 60 or more. I was lucky. I drove the tractor through the fence into the hay barn, actually hit the hay barn, couldn't see where I was going, got in my pickup and was able to get out of there. And just that quick, everything is engulfed.
This is the tree belt that as I drove out of here was all on fire. But you can kind of see with the tree belt itself and the fence, if this area had been blocked off, none of the rest of my family would have got out.
After the fire, everything is pretty much, it's gone, and it's devastating. It's hard to wake up and look at what you have or what you don't have.
To tell somebody he's more than likely going to have to put 380 head of his cattle down because their hooves are burnt bad enough they won't recover.
We don't know how we'll get through it, But the people that settled this ground in the 1800s, they didn't know how they were going to live. And it's been a challenge. Some of us will come and go, but those people that have ranching in their blood that have been here for years and years, their families will be here tomorrow and their ranches will be sustainable.
Everything will go forward. Everybody will pitch in and we'll all get along. And
everybody's willing to do what they can do, and that's enough. And God will take it from there. We have faith that God will take it from here.
Wow, just devastating. But the real work of rebuilding after a disaster of this magnitude is going to take a long time and a lot of money. So imagine this, the fires destroyed more than 18,000 miles of fencing, most of it uninsured, costing up to $10,000 a mile to replace. Recognizing the huge job of rebuilding, the Howard G. Buffett Foundation challenged our sister organizations, Drovers and the Farm Journal Foundation, to join forces to help ranchers bounce back. The Buffett Foundation pledging to match up to $1 million to the effort. Now, you can learn much more about this unique opportunity by logging on to our new website at wildfirerelieffund.org. Well, for all of us at U.S. Farm Report, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to join us again right here next week as we work to build on our tradition. Have a great weekend, everyone.
The time for action is now. Please join Drovers and the Farm Journal Foundation in the $1 Million Wildfire Relief Challenge. Through the generosity of the Howard G. Buffett Foundation, your help will be matched dollar for dollar, up to $1 million. Go to wildfirerelieffund.org to learn how you can help America's cattle country rebuild.